Yeah.
he said to me, just as clear as day, the way you respond right now is going to make or break this vacation.
Wow.
And I just went, and my heart just like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
and I got in the car and I looked back at my kids and they're all just looking at me, mouths
Right.
hanging open, just waiting for
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, for sure.
volcano to erupt because they know mom.
Yep.
Anything
Yep.
goes wrong, mom's going to blow a fuse.
Yep.
And I looked over at my husband and he's the same way. They're all just waiting
Yeah.
for me to just start screaming.
Yeah.
And I just started laughing.
Right.
And I'm telling you, the whole car just went, whew, it just like
Ah.
deflated. Yeah. And I just
Yeah, we
started
don't have
laughing.
to we don't have to run for the hills because mom's not
Yeah.
gonna
And there was
explode.
such a sense of relief from them all that I felt bad, you know.
Yeah.
But we
Sure.
laughed for the next 8 hours about it. And then,
Yeah.
we had to do a little shopping when we got to our destination. And then my
Yeah.
daughter came out that night with her nightshirt on, and there was a hole right in the middle. It looked like somebody tried to shoot her in the heart because it
Oh.
had rubbed,
Yeah.
But we just kept laughing about it. But the funny thing about that is it made me think about the way I act and
Mm.
how that affects the little people
Sure.
in my home, you know.
Welcome to Testimonies of Triumph, where real stories of faith come to life. In each episode, we share powerful testimonies of how God transforms trials into triumphs, bringing hope and redemption to everyday lives. Whether you're seeking encouragement, wisdom, or inspiration, you'll hear how God is working today, turning even the darkest moments into stories of victory. Now, let's dive into today's episode and witness the incredible power of God's grace in action. Welcome, Betty, to Testimonies of Triumph. You and I don't know each other, so if you could do me a favor, sort of take us back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about Betty, what life was like growing up. And I have the privilege of understanding a little bit of your story, not a lot, but a little bit. And so I understand there's some sort of anger issues in there somewhere. And I would love to understand some of that and just kind of understand also, where did God show up in the middle of all of this?
Yeah. So I grew up just me and one sibling
Okay.
in a little small town. We started out in a little small town in Tennessee. And then when I was about 10, we moved to another small town in California. And our purpose for moving was my mom was taking us and moving from my dad. There was a lot
Oh,
of chaos in our young childhood.
okay.
Amidst our fun was some chaos. And I think I got some angry traits from all the fighting and stuff that I would hear.
Sure.
We children learn what they see, right?
Absolutely.
So we moved to California, and as is typical in my work with women over the years, I've discovered a lot of times we enter into relationships that are very similar to the ones we came out of as children.
Ah,
And
yes.
so it may not be the best idea, but gosh, we
Yeah.
sure know how to live that way, right? We sure know
Yeah,
how to adapt.
it's not good, but it's
So
comfortable.
yeah, I know how to cope. So I kind of found myself like that. Wonderful man. We just were a little volatile together.
Yeah.
And my responses have always been um, to lash out first and ask questions later, you
Okay.
know? And I think it's really just been a protective mechanism for me, a survival type of instinct for me. And so I was married for about 22 years and 4 kids. And then that marriage finally ended.
Okay.
Amicably. He's still a very good friend of our family. There's no animosity there at all at this point. But I've God brought another husband to me, and he was the exact opposite.
Oh,
God
really?
has such a sense of humor. That's what I love about him. He's the exact opposite, and not coming from a confrontational past, not liking those kind of conversations, that get heated. Very laid back, very slow to speak, slow to anger. He's just typically what they describe in the Bible, where it says, be slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to
Yeah.
listen. That
Yeah.
is him in a nutshell. And the two of us decided we would adopt three siblings that were three
Wow.
siblings,
In
six,
addition
two,
to
and
the
one.
in addition to the
Yes,
four.
yes. And my husband had three of his own from previous marriage also.
Wow.
I know we're nuts. So these little guys were six, two, and one.
Okay.
And so we brought these three little siblings. They had never gotten to live together or anything. So, it was such a precious thing. And they adapted right into our family, and, our kids just loved on them. It was just a good thing. But mom still has anger issues.
Okay.
Haven't
So
really been dealt
so
with.
you wait just one second. So that
Yeah.
I just get it straight in my head. There are 10 children,
And
right? 10 children and I can't even imagine what chaos looks like with 10 children. It's just got to be crazy. Eh,
well, and to really spell it out, three of them, my husband's kids lived further off, and
okay.
we didn't see them very often.
Okay.
And three of mine were, you know, teenage and
Okay.
up.
All right. So
Only
somewhat
one was
self-reliant.
like, yeah,
Okay.
only one was elementary age, and she was so glad to get these three little siblings because she had always been the youngest kid, and she couldn't wait to boss somebody
Oh
around.
yeah.
And boy, did she do that! She did
Oh
it so
wow.
well. She's such a precious. But
Wow.
anyways, yeah. So they weren't all home at once, but on holidays they were, and
Okay.
yeah, it was crazy.
Okay.
But the day I've always known I've suffered with this anger issue. My brother has had it. It's just something that, we've just carried with us from our childhood. But there's always that one moment
Yeah.
when God just truly grabs you and
Yeah.
like gives you the little shake, how you do your kids when you're
Mhm.
and I we had barely had the kids for very long, and we wanted to take them on a family summer camp out vacation, you
Yeah.
know.
Yep.
Um and when I say camping, my husband, there's one thing about my husband is the supersized meals,
Yep.
he supersizes everything. So we had our 3 bedroom tent for camping. We had our 1 room tent for like eating and storing toys and all of that. And then we had our shower tent, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then of course, with three little kids, I'm thinking, I got to have this, I got to have this, I got to have this. So basically by the time he loaded our van, we had to put a little tailgate thing on the back to hold some more stuff.
Yep.
And
You like to
I
clamp
labeled it the
it.
night before. Yes, I posted it on social media, everything but the kitchen sink, because
Yeah.
literally
Yeah. Yep.
everything but the kitchen sink. And so, he tied it all down, everything. And we leave in the wee hours of the morning because, that's what you do to make it fun and exciting. You
Yeah.
leave before
For
the sun comes
sure.
up, right?
Yeah.
Pack all these kids in the van, and we get about, I guess, an hour or so down the road. And I'm asleep because, hey, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? I get in the car and go to sleep. And he wakes me up and says that cars are like trying to get his attention. There must be something wrong. So he pulls over and then he comes around to my side. And apparently, the luggage that he had tied with a rope had come undone. And so we're dragging luggage behind us. And where we've drug it, it's just like shredded.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get out there. I'm like, this is just great. Instantly mad,
Yeah.
you
For
know,
sure.
instantly mad. It's all his fault. He's the one that tied it up,
Yep.
just having myself a little hissy fit on the side of the highway.
Yep.
And we start picking it all up, shoving it in the van with the kids. And um, I noticed, wait, where's our suitcase? We had a big red suitcase and it's not here. Well, I might be angry, but I've still got a little bit of common sense left. So I'm like, okay, well, if it's not here, it must be back there,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So we turn around and we go down the street, and lo and behold, there's my red suitcase in the middle of the highway.
Okay.
All right, I'll go get it. So we pulled around and he pulled over to the side, and I get out to go get my suitcase. And this is not a joke. I'm not exaggerating in any way. I have photos to prove this.
Yeah.
I go march myself over to the middle of the road to get that suitcase, and that metal rod that runs across the suitcase that
Yep.
holds it straight
Yep.
was bent up, and there was not a thing in my suitcase except one pair of my underwear that were waving like a flag on the top of this suitcase pull.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
so I'm mad by now.
For
I mean,
sure.
when my ears get hot, I know I'm past the point of no return. And I picked that suitcase up and I threw it to the side of the road. I'm so furious,
Yeah.
but still have enough common sense to know, okay, well, then I guess my clothes are
Yeah.
further back.
Yeah, for sure.
So further back we go, and lo and behold, there are the contents of our suitcase all over the entire highway.
Yeah.
And so we turn around and get out, and we're trying to pick them all up. And it's just like, when you drop a piece of paper and the wind blows,
Yeah.
you almost get to it, and psh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what happens to your clothes. And cars are passing us, honking at us, yelling at us. And I'm just literally so angry that it's not even angry. I've
Yeah.
almost lost my mind at this point.
Yep.
And I'm gathering it all up and I'm throwing it on top of the kids. And I'm just like, in my mind, this vacation is over. We can't
Wow.
do it. I'm
Yeah.
just done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
done.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband goes around to get back in the car, and I reach for the door handle. I will never forget this for as long as I live. I reach for the door handle, and it's like God was sitting on my shoulder, almost like,
Hmm.
the little good angel
Yeah.
picture that we get.
Yeah.
And he said to me, just as clear as day, the way you respond right now is going to make or break this vacation.
Wow.
And I just went, and my heart just like, oh, you
Yeah.
know, and I got in the car and I looked back at my kids and they're all just looking at me,
Right.
mouths hanging open, just waiting
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the
For sure.
volcano to erupt because they know
Yep.
mom.
Yep.
Anything goes wrong, mom's going to blow a fuse.
Yep.
And I looked over at my husband and he's the same way. They're all just
Yeah.
waiting for me to just start screaming.
Yeah.
And I just started laughing.
Really?
And I'm telling you, the whole car just went, whew, it just
Ah.
went deflated. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I
We don't
just
have to.
started
We don't
laughing.
have to run for the hills because mom's not going to
Yeah.
explode.
And there was such a sense of relief from them all that I felt bad. you
Yeah.
know well,
Sure.
we laughed for the next 8 hours about it, and
Yeah.
then we had to do a little shopping when we got to our destination, and
Yep.
then my daughter came out that night with her night shirt on, and there was a hole right in the middle. It looked like somebody tried to shoot her in the heart because
Oh.
it had
Yeah.
rubbed. But we just kept laughing about it. But the funny thing about that is it made me think about the way I act
Mm.
and how that affects the
Sure.
little people in my home
Yeah.
you know. And then shortly after that, my husband never shuts a kitchen cupboard. I don't think he knows how. He just is never going to. I've given up. But in the early days, I used to just go, I'd get up and I go, oh, and
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
shut
Yeah.
that cupboard,
Yeah.
just
Uh
like,
huh.
oh, come on, can you not shut a cupboard?
Yeah.
Because I would just let something like that get me mad. Well, then one day I'm sitting on the couch and my little 3-year-old girl gets up and she goes, and she slams the cupboard shut.
Oh, mom can do it,
And the
so I
Lord said
can
to
do
me,
it
look at
too.
what you're teaching your daughter,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, okay, I get it. So hours and hours and hours and hours of facilitator training for anger management, if you could believe.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
Over 100 hours I have had. And in the process of learning to facilitate that class for other people has helped me immensely.
God
And
has a
then
sense
every
of
time
humor, doesn't he?
yeah, and I don't like, really, you have me. And the funny thing is, my brother does anger management classes too. We both do. It's hilarious. But
Oh, that is
it's so
rich.
funny. Yeah. But every time I go through the class with these women, a new group of women, I still learn something,
I'm
you
sure.
know?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that suitcase, it got to be a joke. We'd look for it whenever we go down the highway. I'd make my kids get out and take a picture with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just hysterical. And over the course of years, it went from red to kind of a putrid gray, and grass started growing through the bottom of it. But the same flag was waving all those years.
Oh,
But
funny.
then, that made me think, we keep returning to our pit.
Yeah.
Why do we keep going back there? You
Yeah. Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of that?
Yeah.
But God really spoke to me in that moment, almost in a way that it was almost scary because
Yeah.
it was so clear.
Hmm.
And I'm like looking around, like, really?
Yeah.
Did I just hear that?
Yeah.
But it sometimes takes us when we're so used to acting a certain way, behaving a certain way, when that's just our normal from childhood on, we need that pow moment
Yeah.
to even make us realize, and that was really my pow moment. And I'm not sitting here saying that I don't get angry anymore.
Sure.
That's a battle I will always have,
For sure.
but I'm sure to try to learn to think about it before I speak. And sometimes no words are necessary. Do you really have to respond every single time something upsets you? Is it really worth the battle? Is it worth the outcome? If it
Yeah.
doesn't apply, let it fly kind of thing,
Yeah.
and just to be a little choosier about those kind of things. Um, and it was funny last summer, a situation happened that really angered me in a moment, just
Yeah.
instantly. But I held myself in check and let it
Nice.
just dissipate. And my brother was present, and he said to me the next day, I saw your face and I thought, "Ooh, she's gonna blow." But he goes, "I am so proud of you. You just reined it in and just went on like nothing." He goes, "I can't believe I saw that."
Yeah.
But it's just learning to control those negative behaviors that we've had. And God had to really kind of shake me that day. And so I've spent a lot of time, in his word, praying, um, going through trainings and stuff so that I could not only do better myself, but help other people that are struggling in that area. Because I feel like when you know where someone's coming from, you can help them so much better than if you just like, I have a drug rehabilitation little course that I do. I don't know how much good I am to them because
Sure.
that's not my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I can give them that experience from, a family member's perspective. But when it comes to anger, I know firsthand about that. And
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to share my worst moments with someone if it can help them, you know, learn something or not make the same mistake, or give them encouragement to make a change in their life, because God didn't put us here to be angry all the time.
Yeah, when just so I know, about how many years ago was this sort of face to face with with God in the middle of
Oh,
a road with a suitcase?
yeah. So that was, let's see, about 13 or 14 years ago.
Okay. and
Yeah.
and in the meantime, I get it. We're all work in progress, right? And
Yeah.
you're sort of on your way, and you're helping other people. Um, what's the biggest sort of takeaway from that for you? If someone came to you and said something like, "You know what? I have anger challenges today too, but I just don't know why it's worth spending the time and energy to get through it, because it's just kind of how I'm wired. It's
Yeah.
just who I am. Do I really need to change? What would you tell them?
Yeah, because I kind of felt that way.
Did
Oh,
you?
this is how I was raised. This is just who I am. I'm just
Yeah,
angry. I just say what I mean, and I have a right to speak my mind. I mean,
yeah.
we could come up with all the excuses
No
in the
filter,
world.
Betty.
Yeah, but when you are trying to be a Christ follower, and when you are trying to live a life of, peace
Yeah.
and joy and kindness and gentleness and all of those things, anger is not in that list.
Anger's not a fruit of the spirit. Are you telling me?
Yes. Yes, I hate to break it to you. So, a lot of it comes with, okay, do you want to live for the world or do you want to live for Jesus? Because if you want to live for Jesus, there's things you're going to have to change about your life. And if
Yeah.
you're an angry person, that is one of the things that you are going to have to work on. And it isn't an overnight instant, I'm all better now kind of thing.
Yep.
But God knows our heart and he knows the desire of our heart.
Yeah.
So if our heart is intentional to be seeking him to try to change,
Yep.
and that's truly what we want to do, he's going to honor that and give us those abilities to make those changes.
Yeah.
Not in 24 hours, but over the course of time, you
It.
know.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of the course of time, if you had to sort of shoot for some major goals in the next 5 or 10 years, whether it's around this topic or something else, what would you like to accomplish,
Well,
and
I am
and
so glad
why?
you asked me that.
Yeah.
I have been working probably for the last 2 years on a book
Okay.
called Angry Mom,
Okay.
because I wanted to share my experience in the hopes that, because I know that I'm not the only mom that gets angry.
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
in the hopes that it could help someone and encourage them. So I've been, trying to work on that as kind of like a self-help kind of
Mm-hmm.
book.
Yeah.
And so I've written a lot of devotional books and things like that, but this is something different. This
Okay.
is, you know, it's not a couple of pages of one story and a couple. I have one of those that I just did for moms. It's called Ponderings of a Not So Super Mom. And so it's just little stories about things I've learned
Yep.
with this child or that child or situations, leaving one at college, one is sick, just all
Yeah.
the things of motherhood. And those are great because I feel like those are helpful, but they're little snippets.
Yep.
But this is just 100% dedicated to overcoming anger
Yep.
as a parent. So my goal is to get that finished. I want to get that finished. I want to get it out into the world, into the hands of moms who are struggling. And maybe some of them don't even realize they know they're angry, but they don't realize how that's affecting their children.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when you grow up in an angry household, you become an angry person.
Yep.
And then you take that into your household and you're going to raise my four children that grew up in that household all have anger issues.
Yeah.
They're all in some type of counseling to overcome their anger issues. And that is because they grew up in an environment where it was just as easy to be angry and hold on to that anger for as long as I can and say, things in anger as it was to try to live in a more peaceful manner. So I have, all the guilt and regret that I have to carry around for that as well.
Yeah. The beauty of
But,
yeah, I was going to say that
hopefully they'll,
the beauty of it is that you understand what forgiveness is, and hopefully they'll get to a point where they forgive, and
yeah,
you don't have to carry that with you anymore. That would be
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and I had a anger management class yesterday, and I was talking to the one of the girls about the fact that we have to learn. Not only do we have to learn that we need to forgive other people when they offend us,
Yep.
so that we don't get rooted in that anger and let it
Sure.
fester and turn into something else, but we also have to learn to have grace for ourselves.
Yep.
And for some reason, that is a harder
Yeah.
concept for people to grasp. I can forgive so and so for what they did to me, but I cannot forgive myself for what I did,
Right.
to my child or
Yeah.
whatever. We have to have grace for ourselves because God has grace for us,
Yep.
so he wouldn't give grace to us if we didn't deserve it. So, we need to walk in the confidence that I am forgiven. And when I mess up, I just have to ask God for forgiveness and strength to help me do something better next time. It's always better next time.
Yeah.
If that can be our goal, better next time, then we're moving in the right direction. And this concept of grace was just so um, foreign to her when it comes to herself.
Sure.
This young lady I was talking to yesterday, I'm like, you gotta forgive yourself for these things because otherwise unforgiveness stays rooted in our heart and takes up room that good things
Yeah.
could fill. And that unforgiveness might be for someone else, but it might be for yourself. But either way, it's
Yeah.
harming you.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I got through to her. I feel like I saw the light at the end there, but yeah, that's a big thing is having grace for
when
yourself.
when you're able to talk to other people in the vocation that you have, are you able to share your faith at all, and are you able to share the grace that you've received and that they would receive as well?
Yeah, when you have a nonprofit that does Christ-based
Awesome.
counseling for women, you can you
Yeah,
can
that's
you
great.
can say the word Jesus as much as you want to.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess the reason I'm asking is my wife and I were just coming back from a conference that I was at earlier this week, and when we were traveling, and this notion of grace is really important, right? It is getting this stuff that we don't deserve, and that's
Mhm.
okay, and that's the power of it. Like Christ died for us, knowing that we were sinners and knowing that we're going to
Mhm.
continue to sin. How
Yeah.
amazing is that? And what an amazing model that we don't have to live with the guilt anymore, and we can
Yeah.
unburden ourselves when other people do us wrong. Like,
Yeah.
let's not have to internalize it, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And don't waste that sacrifice
Yeah.
by not having forgiveness for yourself or others. Because to me, when we don't, that's wasting what Christ did for us. That's
Yeah.
like saying, oh, well, yeah, he did that. No big deal. It
Yeah.
is a very big deal.
It is a very big deal. I can't think of a better way to end your interview than it's a big deal.
It's a
So,
very big deal.
yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story. I'm excited about the book that's going to come out and the lives that you're going to touch in the process, and that you get a chance to be able to have open conversations at work very regularly. I think that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Testimonies of Triumph. We hope today's story inspired and encouraged you to see God's hand at work in your life. A special thank you to our amazing engineers and production team at Waldrop Communications for making this show possible. Until next time, keep walking in faith, and remember, God's grace is with you every step of the way.